I'm Luke with Regenerative Fruit Growers, and today we're checking out this wild, naturally seeded by birds and other animals, cherry forest that has been growing here for the better part of the last 100 years, surviving down to minus 35 degrees plus in the foothills of the Rattlesnake Mountains here in western Montana. Let's rewind about 5 years ago to the point in time when I was hiking and actually looked up during my hike and noticed a leaf pattern that looked very similar to many of the sweet cherries that I've grown over the years. At first, I thought these may have been the wild black cherries that you see in the eastern part of the United States. But after I had inspected a little bit further, I noticed these red, fairly large cherries that look a lot like the domesticated cherry that we grow, Prunus avium. So after seeing these bright red sweet cherries, which just so happened to be at peak ripeness at that moment, I ended up reaching up to try some. So I bit into them and they were completely sweet, just a really great flavored sweet cherry. And that took me by complete surprise because in that moment, I had always been told that sweet cherries, by and large, along with many other fruit trees, when grown from seed, do not tend to turn into anything worth eating. And then after that, I looked around me and I saw dozens, if not at least 100 sweet cherries just all around me. And so these trees are anywhere from 10 to 20 feet to upwards to 50, maybe even 60 feet tall. And I never even thought that in my right mind, a sweet cherry, Prunus avium, could ever get that tall in stature. So let's walk in this wild sweet cherry grove and check it out for ourselves, what it's all about. Now, the first thing I notice as I enter this wild cherry grove, and what makes me think that this is a wild cherry grove, is the fact that there's no uniformity to the planting structure. So what I mean by that is if you look at the way in which the trees are arranged, it's completely chaotic. There's no rhyme or reason. They're not 15 feet on center from one another. They're just coming up in any which way, which leads me to the second point, which is they're all bending and there's no vertical upright structure to the trees themselves. So come on in and I'll show you a little bit what I mean by that. So take this patch right here. These are 2 leaders coming out from the base, okay? From this tree right here, you've got several in their vicinity. Whenever I see them kind of clumping in the same vicinity from one another, from one larger tree, that makes me think that these are likely suckers from this tree right here. And so if you come over here and you look, you'll see what I mean by suckering. So you've got new shoots coming from the roots. So that's what is going on right here. These are just little shoots of cherry trees coming right out from the root system. I'm not convinced though that these are all suckers like what you see in some of the aspen groves, for instance, here in Montana, or all over. I think the oldest aspen grove in the world, one of the oldest organisms, if not the oldest, is an aspen grove down in Utah, where they're all the same, genetically speaking, stemming from that mother tree shooting up those suckers. So I'm not fully convinced that that's the case here, because as you can see, if you come down here at the forest floor, you'll see a ton of seeds. So these are all pits, cherry pits, that have fallen from these trees. And so I'm not entirely convinced that these are all suckers. I think it's going to be a mix of suckering trees and then also trees that seeded. Now, given the fact that this is a more established grove, I don't think I see many that are young, as in within the last like 5-10 years. There's just not enough sunlight for them to grow from these pits, so successfully germinate from these pits and grow into trees. Let's start talking now about what else we see in this system. So as I work my way through, let's talk about the various layers that you see in food forests, right? So you've got, obviously you've got all these cherry trees, which are gonna be the main like mid-sized tree layer within the forest, but then there's below that, there are ground covers, herbaceous perennials / biennials, which we'll talk about in a minute, shrubs. I don't see any vines throughout here, but then there are larger trees beyond that. So let's talk first about these ground covers that are present all throughout this grove. So the predominant one that you see on 90% of the floor here, minus the area where there are trails, are these fox geraniums. These are fox geraniums right here. And they're just covered. And so what I like about that is it's covering the forest floor. It's acting as armor effectively for the soil. And then as you work your way in, you've got other plants in here. So this would be a biennial. So I think this is probably the only ground cover we're really seeing. Working our way up to herbaceous perennials and biennials, we've got this one right here. Now this is cow parsnip, and this is a biennial. So similar to its cousin carrot, which is in the same family. These will, in its first year, so this is what the first year looks like, it'll pump all of its energy that it's collecting from these leaves this growing season into a taproot, kind of like carrots. So we just harvest carrots before they go on to their second year, which is when they will produce seed, make babies, which is what this second year is doing. This is the second year of the cow parsnip, and it's saying, let's make babies. See these seeds right here? And it's in the umbel family, which is the same Latin root as umbrella. Kind of looks like an umbrella there. Anyways, we'll move our way through this grove, see what else we come up with on the herbaceous perennial / biennial layer. Aha, check this out. So right here we've got stinging nettle. So this is a perennial. We grow this actually quite a bit, and it's not stinging me right now for whatever reason. I probably should have been a little bit more careful there. But especially maybe earlier on in the growing season and on some of these younger leaves, you got to watch out. They've got these little tendrils that can sting you. That can be neutralized just by cooking them. And they actually make for quite palatable and tasty edible greens. And they're also medicinal. And then you also have several others in here. So over here, we've got motherwort. So motherwort is another herbaceous perennial. And let's see. Okay, let's talk about actually some of the shrubs in here as well. So here's one of the native currants to Montana. This is a red currant, and we should be able to see some of the currants here. And because it's not getting that much sunlight, look at this. There are currants, but they're just very, very small. So you see that? Let's try them. Yeah, they're sweet. They're a little tart. They're good though. Yeah, tastes a lot like the Red Lake red currant that we grow. We also have some snowberries over here, which is bird friendly. And hey, Sasha, come on. Got to wrangle this pup. She'll sometimes run off. All right, so let's head over here and see what else we can find. So we've got some more snowberries. We've got some more of basically everything we've seen. And then I'm looking at some of these fallen trees. This is cool. You tend to see this in more established forest ecosystems where you've got fallen trees. Now this is acting as a nurse log. It's inviting a ton of microbiology, bacteria, fungi. So you've got saprophytic fungi in here. I mean, I can look around and see, here's a wood saprophyte. This is hawkswing. This is a hawkswing mushroom. It's a little TFG, as we call it, too far gone. So you wouldn't be able to consume this. Some say it's a little bit bitter, but I've actually cooked these up, and they cook them, saute them in butter, and they make actually a pretty decent edible mushroom. So yeah, you've got these fallen logs. Those are gonna be decomposed by wood rot fungi, like the hawkswing and others. You tend to see hawkswing more in spruce dominant ecosystems, but they're present here. So, hey, Sasha, come on. So check this out right here. So right here, what we have is a cherry tree that was probably wind blown, fell over, and it was just laying on the forest floor. But it didn't end there. And oftentimes trees will do this where they'll get wind blown, and then what happens is they'll still have some of their roots, as you can see, that are in the ground. So these are clearly exposed and died, but then the tree will partition more energy into the side of the tree where its roots weren't exposed. So that's the case down here. And so then it keeps coming, and if it can find sunlight in that moment, then the energy investment that the tree engaged in so building more roots to further stabilize it ended up making sense by being able to collect that energy. So come over here, and what you'll see is this was one of the early scaffold limbs right here that then shot up, and you see it form another scaffold, which is now acting as almost a miniature sub-tree in its own right. So that is able to access sunlight in the same manner in which the original tree was accessing sunlight, and now the tree is effectively saved. So that adds sort of to the structural heterogeneity of the forest, which I think is kind of cool to see. And so, one thing, check this out. Here's something else that's kind of cool that also tells me that runners or suckers are present throughout the forest here, is that this actually was a root that then formed a shoot right here, and then for whatever reason got knocked off. So I believe if I go back to forest ecology, there's what's called the light compensation point, which is the point in time at which the tree is just able to collect enough energy to satisfy the maintenance and other respiration costs that are really expensive, energetically speaking, from a tree's standpoint. Last thing I'll note is that you've got surrounding this grove, you've got the trees that are above this current tree layer. So I wouldn't say the cherry trees are necessarily the highest climax tree layer. You've got ponderosa pine right here on the periphery. And these are all kind of enveloping this whole grove. All right, and another thing that's really cool to note is if you look down on this forest duff layer right here, which is the uppermost layer of organic matter on the forest floor, you see a bunch of different, just a diverse array of organic matter. So you've got everything from sticks, needles, lichen, leaves, catkins, pine cones, lots of different fodder for the bacteria and fungi that are then going to cycle those nutrients that are then going to be provided to the trees. And on top of that, it's armor in areas where, say, you don't have this other piece of armor for the soil, like the fox geranium that I mentioned earlier. This acts as armor, and then it also helps with water holding capacity. So if you go down in here, look at this. We're almost in August, and this is pretty moist down in here. So it really acts as a sponge and will end up saving on water. And this is something that any regenerative fruit grower can incorporate in their context. I think we should try the cherries. So let's go try some of these. I know I saw some over here earlier. All right, so check this out. So here's what the cherries look like. Make sure that whenever you're picking cherries, you pick them with the stem on them. Otherwise, if you pick them like that, this can rot. So if you store it for a while, it can be an infiltration point for mold. So look at that. Pretty nice, decent sized. I mean, especially given that it's not accessing that much light, but decent sized cherry, you know, basically blemish free. All right, so let's try this. There's that pit. Yeah, it's sweet. Slight bit of astringency, more stringent than a domesticated cherry like a Lapins that we grow, and that are the predominant cherry variety, especially that people think of as flathead cherries, which isn't an actual variety of cherries. It's more of a regional, grown around Flathead Lake. But Lapins is one of those that comprise the main cherries grown around. It's not quite like a Lapins, not as sweet. Lapins doesn't have some of that astringency, but I mean, for just a wild cherry, this is pretty darn good. Yeah. And if you like this video, feel free to subscribe to our channel and like it and share it, and it really helps us out a lot. Hope you enjoyed it. So we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Happy growing.